Welcome back to Mind Pump TV. I'm your host, Adam Schaefer, and we're continuing on this glute development series right here. So this is one of my favorite moves to develop the glutes. This is your guys' Bulgarian Split Squat with a slight variation. All right, let's talk about posture and starting position. So when we start off in the Bulgarian Split Squat, one of the things that we want to do is we want to start from the ground. Big common mistake I see people do is they kick their leg back on a bench and then they grab the weights and they get down in the position. And you want to make sure you're in a comfortable position when you're all the way down the ground. So this is comfortable. I could sit here all day. I have something that's got my ankle hooked up on it that's not very high off the ground. You don't want something too elevated. I want something that I could kneel down. I can hook back my ankle across it, and I feel comfortable to be in this position. So start from the ground up. And then the next thing is the variance for this. So we use more of your butt instead of more of your quad. So this is a kind of a cool exercise that you can play with your foot position to dictate if you want to feel this more in the quad or feel this more in the glute. Since this is a glute series and we're focusing on the butt, we're going to position your feet in a different position. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my foot out in front of me a little bit. So the further my foot gets out in front of me, the more I'm going to feel in my glutes. The closer my heel is to my body, the more I'm going to drive off my quad. Now you don't want to get too far out in front of you because then you're going to stretch back here on the hip flexor and you're not going to feel it in the right glute. So you just want to take this to where my knee is bent at 90. That's kind of like your starting neutral position, and bringing it in is going to be more quad. Bringing it a little more forward is going to be more glute. So I'm slightly in front of that 90-degree bend at my knee. Now that I have the position, I'm going to grab my dumbbells. Now, I recommend you start this off with no weight just to get the form and technique down before you start to load this. So before I load this, let's talk about your mechanics without the weights and being able to posture up. So I want to make sure that I have a good neutral spine. The same cue that I gave with your guys' deadlifts with the stick or the dowel bar, you can use this for this exercise because you still should have that neutral rigid spine, and this is still a hip hinging movement. So from this position, I've got good posture. I'm standing up tall and straight. And then when I drive up, I'm going to drive through the heel and let the hips come forward. So a common mistake that you see people do when they drive up is they drive back. And you drive back, you're going to feel all quads, and we're not going to get that hinging of the hips. So I want to squeeze the hips and pull the hips forward as I drive up. Coming all the way back down to that position, reset, and then drive back up. Now, once you feel comfortable doing this with just your body weight, then you can add load. But a common mistake as soon as somebody starts to add load is they drive up is this knee is going to want to collapse in. You want to keep that open, just like the sumo deadlift we talk about. We want to work that side butt, that glute med. So you want to keep that knee open as you drive up through the heel and thrust the hips forward as you come up. All right, let's talk about breathing and tension and tempo when you guys do this movement. Now, there's a few camps on how your upper posture should be when you do this. Some people think that it doesn't matter if you're slightly rounded forward when you drive off this because it mimics like what sprinters would do and run. Personally, when I teach and I train this exercise, I want that good rigid posture and good spine neutral spine when you do this because a lot of carryover goes into the squat and the deadlift from the split stance squat. So I want good posture, neutral spine, chest is up, and then I want your arms tight. So just like you would get into a deadlift, I get my dumbbells down in this position, I get them, and then before I pick up off the ground or before I press up with my leg, I want to posture up. So I want to posture up, my arms are nice and straight, and then all I'm thinking about is driving through the heel and hinging through my hips. Now the last cue before I come up is the bracing of the core, just like I would do in a deadlift or a squat. I brace the core, drive through. Decelerate nice and slow and controlled. You don't want to come slam down on your knees, so it should take you about 3 to 4 seconds on the way down, and then drive through. Slowly come down, nice and slow and controlled. Gather yourself, good posture, drive through. And I'm driving through the heel, and I'm squeezing the butt at the top. So as I come up, when you're doing this, it's a hinge movement. So I'm down in this position. As I come through, all I'm thinking about is driving the hips forward. So squeezing the butt, driving the pelvis forward and posturing all the way up. I slowly decelerate, just like the other cues in a deadlift. I hinge, I break at the hip, and I hinge back, and then I thrust forward as I come up. That's how you use those glutes in that movement. All right, let's talk about how we know we're doing this exercise correct or how we know we're doing this exercise wrong. So you know you're doing it wrong if we feel aches and pains. So if it's bothering your knee, bothering your upper back when you do this, or your low back even. But probably the most common mistake that people make is actually feeling this in the trail leg and their hip flexor. This is super common because most people have really tight hip flexors as it is. And then most people make the mistake of the size of the bench that they use to put their leg on. Notice I'm a 6'3" guy, and this bench is maybe a foot off the ground that I'm hooking my heel on. If I use a standard bench to do that, now somebody that doesn't have tight hip flexors may completely fine, but that's not a majority of people. A majority of people that hook their leg back on a standard size bench are gonna feel the stretch on their hip flexors, and then they end up doing this exercise. They're trying to feel it in their butt, but all they're doing is feeling it in their hip flexor. It ends up being more of a stretch than it does feel like an exercise for their glute. One of the ways to make sure that you feel more of it in the front, the lead leg and the lead butt, is to make sure that you have your foot hooked on something that's low enough that it's not stretching and pulling way back on your guys' hip flexor. The other common mistake is also when people go to get in it, they start way out and then they lean back to hook their leg on something. And look what that puts me back here in my hips. My hips are already I'm not even exercising yet, and I already feel this pull all the way down my quad, up my hip flexors right here. And so when I start doing this exercise, I'm gonna feel a lot there, more so than I'm even gonna feel over on the lead leg, which we're trying to feel it in. So I wanna be able to get back close and tight to wherever I'm actually hooking my leg on. And then I wanna put that lead foot a little forward so I can drive off the heel. Now, another way that you'll feel or think that you're doing this wrong is if you feel it in your knees. And that's really common also, and that's the collapsing of the knee. So as you drive up, it's just gonna be natural for the body to wanna create leverage, and the knee will collapse in for you to push up. So you wanna think about pushing the knee out as you drive up. So as I decelerate, same thing, as I decelerate, the knee's gonna wanna collapse in. You have to mentally concentrate on keeping that knee out. Now what's great about that is while you're mentally concentrating on keeping the knee open and out while you're driving on the hill, you're also activating that glute med, which is that side butt. It's gonna give you that heart-shaped butt that everybody's looking for. So think about pushing the knee up, or excuse me, pushing the knee out as you drive through the hill. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed some of those cues and those help you guys out with developing your glutes. Now, when you start off with this movement, I highly recommend, even though we did show doing it with some weights, to stick with your body weight until you get the mechanics down really well. It's definitely a challenging exercise. It can be really, really difficult to add weight and resistance to a movement that has a lot of things going on. So perfect the movement first, get really good at that. You can get a lot of benefit just doing your body weight. And then as you feel better about the movement and you notice you're driving through your glutes, then you can start to progress and add weight. Also, if you guys like this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Also, turn on the notification. We're dropping videos every single week. And those of you guys that want more information about developing your glutes, we have a free guide. All you have to do is click the link.